What we'll do is we'll just go through the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint, I won't go through in too much detail. It will just be over explaining otherwise. The reason we did it in this format is so that people could read it as we go. I won't insult people by reading along with them. So what we are here to do is we're looking at a new constitution. This has been on the agenda for at least 3 or 4 years. I know it was tabled at the AGM 2018. It was definitely tabled 2019, 2020, no. But I think even going back further than that, it's always been a thing that we've realized we needed to do. We just hadn't got around to. As Bernie's saying, few important points on this. This is not to be shared. This is just part of the process. The other part of this process is, sorry, Bernie, am I better to go through, because I've got it opened on my screen as well. I should be reading through this one and forgetting mine, yes?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, because of my notes, I'm going to have to. So we're on page. Okay, we're on page 3. Lovely. Yes. So please don't share this. We do appreciate you joining on this. This is a good opportunity for us to do this and to get it right. It's certainly long overdue, and I believe we've followed best process on this. As I said, it has been floated on quite a few AGMs. All of the board, if we go to the next slide, all of the board have signed off on this. And I do know that we have canvassed quite a few members as well as part of this process. Slide 5 is, I suppose, the background of the Constitution. The Constitution initially is from 1987. Now, that was when we were a cooperative of farmers. The Constitution has been updated, but it's still the base Constitution. I think Bernie explained it that we've got a 30-odd-year-old netball that has been repaired and had the bladder changed and the stitching done. It's time now that we can't repair it anymore. It's no longer fit for purpose, and we aren't that company that was this company. We are no longer a cooperative of farmers. We are no longer a certification body. We are an advocacy body, and we need a new modern constitution that allows us to go into the future in the advocacy role and give us flexibility to perhaps adapt in however the company is going to adapt in the future. So that's, I suppose, the background as to what the purpose of it is. When we formed the task force, we had 2 members of the 2009 when it was updated or when they made some changes. We actually found some people who were involved in that updating process, and we got them to be on the next generation task force. So that was Annie Brown, John and Quentin Kennedy. Why the need for change? Well, again, this document was made to be read through. So again, I won't insult people. Essentially, in the way when I've spoken with some of the members that have called me, we're all in business. I don't think any of us have any documentation, any policy manuals, any procedures that are 32 years old. And it is negligent of us to think that we can do what we do with a 32-year-old document. That's it in a nutshell. We haven't changed. Amanda, if you want to go to the next. Can we swap over, Bernie? That's it. So the new constitution has kept all of the all of our objects. We have not changed membership. We haven't changed membership rights. We haven't changed any of the important stuff. All we've done is we've gone to PwC. They have a template for not-for-profits. A lot of companies similar to ours are using that template. It appears to be the best one out there. PwC has given us a semi-pro bono rate, which has, so we thank them for that. We also engage with Seafood Council of Australia, who also use this template. Thank you. Yeah, we also engage with the Seafood Council. So we reached out to them, asked them who did their constitution. They put us to PwC, and hence we are where we are. We also engage with the Australian Institute of Company Directors for best practice for not-for-profits. So I think the process of this, we really have covered off on pretty much every area, every avenue, and we have definitely followed best process. To the next slide. Okay, this is the Constitution Task Force. As I said, Quentin Kennedy, he was on the original review panel, as was Annie Brown, John. What we tried to do is we found members who had been involved for a very long time, who've been in the organic industry and very well respected. So we thank Quentin, Dooley, Annie and Roger for their work there. Myself and Bernie, we're there as board members. Bernadette's also there from her legal background and also as company secretary. The task force met quite a few times. We did go backwards and forwards with drafts. We also had quite a few meetings with PwC, whilst they were also on that same process, that same call. So if we want to go to, okay, so Bernie, this is over to you. You were on mute, but you're not anymore.
Thanks, Martin. So just to add to what Martin said, essentially, in terms of the context of why we're changing, Martin, indicated that we have evolved essentially into a much broader member-based organisation. Our membership types also needs to evolve to be reflective of what the industry is. The skill set of directors needs to cover more skills than simply being a financial member or an organic farmer or producer. When we were actually consulting with PwC and the AICD, they indicated that our election process at the moment, when it comes to board membership, is actually not good governance practice because it is political. So it's actually not in the best interest of AR and as a member organisation. And then the convening of the subcommittees is also too prescriptive, that it actually limits what AR needs to do and what it needs to represent. So the idea is that we need to make it simpler. Effectively, our current constitution is too prescriptive unnecessarily. It's outdated, it's not fit for purpose, and it doesn't actually incorporate good corporate governance based on how AR has evolved. So as Martin said, we have looked at Seafood Industry Australia, who went through a very similar process a few years ago. They are also a member-based organisation and a peak body for, the voice for Australian seafood. The AICD is considered the best practice, entity that actually provides, good governance practices and guidelines they have the not-for-profit governance principles that they outlined, and a lot of the changes and updates that we've made to the Constitution are actually based on those governance principles. PwC was engaged on the basis that they advise a lot of other not-for-profits, and they actually advised Seafood Industry Australia a few years ago, so they've gone through this. And so we thought, I don't need to tell you how good and who PwC is, but being a Big Four professional services firm, they have the right skills and capabilities to actually be able to advise AO on this significant change. So in terms of any changes to the Constitution, two of the other key things that we need to be mindful of as a board is that we can't change any existing rights allocated to members under the current Constitution. So that certainly is going to be adhered to and has been adhered to with the new Constitution draft. The second point is that we are also covered within the Corporations Act, essentially. So any changes to the Constitution have been updated to reflect compliance with the Corporations Act. So this is just a summary of the AICD's statement about good governance, and it says that it exists where an organisation has systems and processes in place that are appropriate to its circumstances and which enable the organisation to pursue its purpose effectively and meet its obligations under the law. That is the reason why we are changing the Constitution, because as a board, we don't think that the current Constitution actually allows us to do that. It's not appropriate anymore in the current circumstances of how we have evolved. And it needs to be clarified essentially to reflect what we need to do moving forward. The AICD has good governance principles. There's 10 of them. Again, I'll let you read through what these are, but all of these principles are actually embedded within the new draft of the Constitution. And each of the drafts that each of the key sections that I'll be going through today actually maps out which of these principles tie to that new version of the Constitution. So this is the second part of the governance principles as well. And it talks about, transparency, accountability, culture, and having a purpose, the board composition, including making sure that the board has the right skills matrix as well. So in terms of the summary of the key changes to the Constitution, Martin and I will talk through the key ones, which are outlined in here. We've taken screenshots of the proposed draft, and you can see that it's got draft written all over it because this will be subject to member approval at the upcoming AGM, hence why we're chatting about this now. It's also important to note that part of the engagement that we talked with the task force members was how do we actually communicate this with members? How do we actually make sure that everyone is consulted? And one of the recommendations was, for us to have the conversations with individual members to clarify any questions or concerns, and to run these webinars, hence why we're here today. So in terms of the summary of the key changes, the first one is that we are updating the objects to make sure that it clarifies, what our purpose is. Electronic transactions and meetings have been incorporated in there as well. That's a requirement under the Corporations Act to make sure that we are able to do that as required. I'll talk about director selection later. CEO appointment is something that has been included as well in the Constitution. The current Constitution doesn't have any provisions about appointing in the terms of the CEO appointment, which is not good governance. So again, we're incorporating that. And then updating the terms around convening of committees. So in terms of the old and the new, this slide shows essentially that, we've got all the the table of contents there and a lot of forms and schedules attached to the current constitution, whereas we're actually cleaning it up and making sure that it's a lot more succinct and clear and to the point. So the contents of the new constitution is on the next slide there. Okay, so in terms of the objects, this is the new objects under the proposed new constitution. And this essentially clarifies what we as a peak body need to do for the industry. We haven't omitted any objects in there that will actually change the rights of AO as a not-for-profit. We've kept those, or the rights of AO to actually take avail of any tax exemptions, essentially. So that's been retained. Martin, is there anything else that you wanted to add on this? Sorry, you're on mute.
What we did as a board, we did have a look at, and the objects were revisited, I think, in 2009 or something, but again, they were revisited when we still had a certification body, when we were still in that old format. So we did go back and we did revisit some of the objects, and I believe what we have now is a very comprehensive set of objects that allows us to do what it is that we need to do as the peak body for organics in Australia.
That's right, and it's not limiting to a certain sector of the organic industry. It's actually broad to say Australian organic products all throughout the objects. There's focus there in terms of education, research, and advocacy as well. So those are things that are, key to what we are and who we are moving forward. The next one is about membership. And again, this is about clarifying ordinary members and associate members. As I said previously, we're not amending any current membership rights. That continues and will continue based on this new constitution. All we're doing is actually clarifying who can vote. Again, no changes there, but the current constitution is actually not very clear in terms of how classes of members are actually identified. So that's the key thing. We've also outlined clearly who the ordinary certified members are and ordinary grandfathered members as well. Again, the current constitution is not very clear on the definition of grandfathered members before the split between AO and a certification body. So again, that's clarifying it and who can vote between associate voting and associate non-voting members. Martin, anything else to add? No. Other point as well is eligibility to apply to become a member. It's anyone who is engaged or interested in the Australian organic industry is eligible to apply. The board still has the right to approve memberships as well. That's been transferred over from the old to the new constitution. And we've again clarified in terms of, who is an ordinary certified member and an associate voting member as well. The other point as well that we've clarified in the new constitution is about members' rights and the fact that they are entitled to vote and receive notices, attend and speak at AGMs. And in terms of voting, again, who can vote based on their membership. Associate non-voting members cannot vote. And in terms of suspension of memberships as well, that's outlined, and there is a right to appeal those suspensions based on the terms under the new constitution, essentially, and that just applies the principles of natural justice. The next point was that we're updating is the appointment and removal of directors. Martin, did you want to go through this at the outset?
I'm just making sure I'm not on mute. Yeah, this is probably the biggest change. As Bernadette said before, our current process is it's a political process. It's not based on skill set. It's not based on what the requirements are of the company. It's quite possible that we could end up with 2 or 3 directors that are in the same field or in the same section of the industry. So what we have looked at here, based on how the Seafood Council do it, based on how PwC recommend it, and based on the Australian Institute of Company Directors' directives, we've looked at putting it forward so that we have a remunerations and nominations committee. We go out to our members and say the remunerations and nominations committee are looking for people on the board with this skill set from this sector of the industry. They would then put forward their applications and their interest. That would then be reviewed by the remunerations committee and the nominations committee. They would make a decision, and then that would go to the members at the AGM to be ratified. That's basically the process. I think it's long overdue, and it is definitely best practice. The other thing that is absolutely worth noting, usually less than 10% of our members actually vote on this process anyway. So for 90% of our members, there's no change here, but it's a much better, more robust way to select board members, and from a skill set point of view and for the future of the company, it's absolutely a change that I think we have to have.
Thanks, Martin. And to add to that as well, the rotation of directors as well remains the same in terms of making sure that there's a succession plan there, and that, but also at the same time that no more than 1/3 of directors actually exit to make sure that there's a retention of knowledge and history. So that's the key things. Those are the key things that we've put in place. The Remuneration and Nominations Committee will comprise of independent people within that is approved by the board, and again that's part of good governance, and that's very similar to how publicly listed companies actually do their board selection and nomination process.
We also have we've kept in the board, the chair process, that the chairperson can't sit for more than 2 terms. Again, we think that's best practice. It'll keep the organisation looking forward, and it should be able to manage the change process very well.
Yep, that's right. In terms of the powers and duties of directors, again, just making that clear, because at the moment it's very, it's not as clear in the current constitution. So in terms of best practice, a constitution should have specific powers outlined in its constitution, consistent with the Corporations Act. So again, we've made those clear in here, including, signing, entering into contracts, and so forth. The other key point that we've as I said, put in the new constitution is the CEO appointment and general terms and who can appoint. The key thing as well is we are expressly stating that the CEO cannot be a board member. There is a separation there, and we know that members are particularly concerned about that point. So that's something that has been expressly incorporated in our constitution, because that's not very clear in the current constitution. The last key aspect that we have incorporated is actually simplifying the establishment and convening of committees, and giving the directors to convene committees and give them particular delegations, whether to advise on certain things or actually do certain things depending on what the issue is. So again, we've made that a lot simpler. We haven't specified any particular committees, advisory committees or so forth, that the directors need to convene, because we think that that will change depending on, the membership base and the priorities as well. So we've made that pretty clear that it's a broad form type of committees that the directors can convene. And that pretty much sums up all the changes. Martin, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Only on the committees. What we've done with that is they've been reworked so that they follow the same process that the OTA uses in the States. When we were doing our committees previously, they didn't have enough structure to them. We looked at the OTA structure, and we really liked how they managed their committee process, and so we have brought that across. So you would have seen that when we've sent it out previously, that we have things like task force, like the Constitution task force, and then we have the advisory committees, and then we have a member-based thing that is underneath that as well. That's for an information sharing. So I think that should make our committees a lot more impactful, and probably also easier for members to join if they know exactly what the outcomes are, if they know what their time commitment is. I think that tends to make that easier as well.
That's right. Thank you. So to sum up, those are the key changes. The actual document itself, in terms of the new draft of the Constitution, will be made available from your member portal. So the link is there. Make sure you do have access to the member portal. The AGM notice of meeting will outline that and will provide links to the member portal, including a summary of the key changes in a side-by-side. As Martin said earlier, we can't actually provide a marked up version of the old versus the new, because otherwise all you're going to get is a completely a full document with all the markups in there, because what PwC did was actually use their best practice, most up-to-date template and customized it for AO. So all we can do is actually provide a key summary of the changes from what the old says versus what the new says, and that will be part of your notice of meeting pack that will be sent out in October. Now, move on to any questions. I'll wait for a few seconds. Feel free to raise your hand if you can, or send it via the chat or via the Q&A. I don't think we've got any questions. Everyone's okay, Martin. So on that note, what we'll do, you all have our contact details. Feel free to reach out to us. Otherwise, we can end the webinar early.
Fantastic. All right. Again, thank you for attending. Bernie, thank you for running it and for all of your work.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
See you guys.